Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something that's developing really fast across the U.S.
That's right. We're looking at this wave of protests that have kicked off after those recent immigration enforcement raids.
Exactly. And we've got a whole set of news reports here covering what's been happening in, well, quite a few different cities. They're like snapshots, really.
Giving us glimpses from the ground as things unfold.
So our mission, basically, is to sort through all this information coming in. We want to pull out the key details from these reports for you.
Figure out where these protests are actually happening, what sorts of actions are taking place.
Yeah, actions from protesters and from the authorities, and also what the official reactions have been.
We're aiming to give you a quick way to get up to speed on, well, what seems like a pretty significant series of events.
And just to be clear, everything we're discussing comes straight from the source materials we reviewed. We're just laying out what the reports say.
Okay, so let's jump in. Where do the sources say this all kicked off?
The reports point to Los Angeles. It seems the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, started raids there last Friday.
Right, and that seems to be the spark.
Definitely. The coverage shows those raids immediately led to protests right there in LA. They apparently went on all weekend.
And sometimes got pretty heated, it sounds like. Clashes reported.
Yeah, the sources mention clashes. And what's really striking early on is the government response mentioned in the LA reports.
You mean President Trump mobilizing troops?
Exactly. National Guard and Marines, according to the reports.
Which is quite a step. And California's Governor Newsom.
He hadn't asked for them, the reports say, and later he apparently asked the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, to pull those orders back.
So right away you see this tension baked into this situation.
Totally. And this whole situation, the protests against the raids, it didn't just stay in L.A.
No, the reports make that clear. By early this week, Monday, Tuesday, we start seeing reports of demonstrations popping up in other cities.
All across the country, it seems.
And it sounds like it's not over. The reports mention more demonstrations being planned, including these specific No Kings events.
Yeah, nationwide events. Now, looking at the bigger picture, what are the sources saying about the official stance from, say, the Trump administration?
Well, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is quoted. Pretty direct statement. ICE will continue to enforce the law.
Okay, so a clear signal there. No backing down despite the protests.
Seems like it. And then down in Texas, you have Governor Greg Abbott. The reports say he deployed the Texas National Guard.
For peace and order was the phrase used.
That's the quote, yeah. But he also reportedly added that peaceful protest is legal.
Ah, but with a condition.
Right. He's quoted saying arrest will happen if lines are crossed.
So you see this theme emerging in the reports, this kind of balancing act or maybe tension between protest rights and maintaining order.
Exactly. And the sources give us a bunch of specific examples from different cities showing how that played out. And it wasn't the same everywhere.
Okay, let's get into those specifics then. What did the reports from Austin show?
So Austin had a protest on Monday, started at the state capitol, apparently peacefully.
Okay.
But then the crowd moved downtown, heading towards the J.J. Pickle Federal Building.
Which houses an ICE office, right?
That's right. And according to the reports, that's where things really heated up.
How so?
Reports mentioned demonstrators trying to spray paint the building and then throwing things rocks, bottles at police who had set up a barricade.
And the police response?
The reports detail Austin police using pepper spray balls, and state police used tear gas to disperse the crowd.
Were there injuries mentioned?
Yes. The sources report 4 Austin police officers injured. 3 apparently hit by very large rocks, 1 hurt during an arrest.
And arrests.
12 total arrests reported between city and state police.
It's interesting, the reports capture different viewpoints there, too, like that protester quote.
Oh yeah, saying change only comes when you keep putting pressure on the people in power and need to go beyond just words, sort of justifying the confrontation.
But then you have the Austin police chief, Lisa Davis, quoted saying, sure, peaceful protest is fine, but...
When that protest turns violent, throwing rocks and bottles, that will not be tolerated. Pretty clear line drawn there.
And the reports also noted the Capitol itself closed early that day because they expected the protest.
Right. Okay, so moving over to Dallas, what happened there?
Reports say hundreds gathered on a city bridge Monday night. It went on for hours.
Until the police declared it an unlawful assembly.
Exactly. Told everyone to leave. But the coverage says some people threw objects.
Ah, and that prompted the police action.
Seems so. Reports mention officers using pepper spray and smoke to clear the bridge, and at least 1 arrest was made.
Which ties back to what Governor Abbott said about crossing the line.
Yeah, seems like a direct example of that policy in action, based on the reports. What about Denver?
Denver saw action Tuesday night. Police responded in full force, is the phrase used in the reports, to marches downtown. This was after an earlier protest at the Capitol.
Were there confrontations?
The reports mention objects thrown something looking like a pepper ball at police, apparently. And then near Coors Field, smaller groups reportedly broke off from a peaceful protest and threw rocks and bottles at officers.
Okay.
Law enforcement also blocked an entrance ramp to I-25, the highway there, to keep protesters off, presumably.
Did they use tear gas?
Police specifically said no, according to the reports. They used smoke, but confirmed it wasn't tear gas. At least one person was detained.
Philadelphia also sounds like it was pretty intense. 15 arrests on Tuesday.
Yeah, Philly had about 150 protesters, reports say. They gathered in Center City, and their targets were the Federal Detention Center and the ICE headquarters there.
What were they reported doing?
Marching, disrupting traffic. The reports use phrases like endangering public safety. Police confronted them. Sources say the group ignored 3 orders to disperse. Then, when officers tried to make arrests, the reports state the crowd escalated, becoming violent and extremely disorderly.
That sounds serious. Injuries reported there, too?
Yes, 2 Philly officers with minor injuries. And 2 women who were arrested also reported injuries. One of the arrests was specifically for aggravated assault on an officer.
Okay, let's shift coasts. Seattle. Seems smaller there.
Yeah, much smaller, according to the reports. About 50 people outside the downtown immigration court on Tuesday.
What were they doing?
Chanting, holding signs, free them all, abolish IC, no to deportations, that kind of thing. Mostly peaceful initially.
But then?
Later on, reports mentioned them putting scooters in front of the building's entryways.
And the motivation cited in the report.
A demonstrator from Students for a Democratic Society, AUW, was quoted. Said it was solidarity with LA and opposing IC in Seattle itself.
There was another detail in the Seattle reports, wasn't there? About access to the court?
Oh, right. Yeah, that was interesting. Legal advocates who usually observe these hearings, which are normally public, were reportedly turned away. Media, too.
Okay, back to California near the start. Santa Ana. What did the reports say about the aftermath there?
They painted a picture of the scene the morning after protests. Armored vehicles blocking the road to the Civic Center.
Cleanup underway.
Yeah, workers clearing broken glass, bottles. And graffiti mentioned 2 profane slogans against ICE, and President Trump's name crossed out.
And a military presence.
National Guard officers were there, reports say. Controlling access to the area really gives you a sense of the disruption.
Let's jump back east. Boston. Reports mention protests there, too.
Yes, hundreds gathered Monday at City Hall Plaza. The coverage highlighted a specific reason there.
Which was?
Protesting the arrest of a union leader, David Huerta, during those initial LA raids.
Ah, okay, so a direct link back to LA.
Definitely. Signs said things like, Massachusetts stands with our neighbors in Los Angeles. Can't free David, free them all.
And was he released?
Yes. The reports noted he was released on $50,000 bond later that day.
The Boston coverage also included quotes from union leaders, right?
Yeah, connecting it to broader issues. Chrissy Lynch from the AFL-CIO quoted saying something like, an immigrant doesn't stand between an American worker and a good job, a billionaire does.
Interesting angle.
And Dave Foley from CIU Local 509 saying Trump and his ICE regime have been tearing families apart. And Boston's mayor, Michelle Wu, also weighed in.
Yes, the reports quote her showing support for the protesters, criticizing IC tactics and the guard deployment. She said, secret police do not make communities safer.
Wow, strong words from the mayor.
What about Washington, D.C.? More union activity there.
Yes, related to Huerta's arrest as well. Several unions gathered Monday, reports say, protesting the raids, calling for his release, and marching past the Department of Justice.
Was there any federal lawmaker presence mentioned?
Yes. U.S. Rep. Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington State, was there. She was quoted condemning the mass IC raids and also commenting on the response to protesters.
What did she say about the response?
The source quoted her saying, peaceful protesters exercising constitutional rights were being met with tear gas and rubber bullets. That's how the source reported her statement.
Okay. San Francisco also saw repeated protests.
Yes, marches in the Mission District. Monday was the 2nd day in a row, according to the reports.
How did Monday compare to Sunday?
The reports contrasted them. Sunday apparently saw 154 arrests. Monday's demonstration was described as overwhelmingly peaceful.
But still some issues.
Yeah, several arrests were still made Monday for vandalism and other criminal acts, the reports state.
And the mayor there, Daniel Lurie.
His quote in the coverage tried to strike that balance again, upholding protest rights, but saying violent and destructive behavior wouldn't be tolerated.
Seems like a common refrain from city leaders in these reports. Let's talk New York City. Sounds like major activity there, too.
Oh yeah, reports detailed clashes between protesters and police during a rally with thousands on Tuesday.
Why were they rallying? Any specific reasons mentioned?
One protester quoted listed several things: wanting full rights for immigrants, stopping the raids and deportations, and getting the National Guard and military out of L.A.
So, connecting local demands with the LA situation.
Exactly. Gatherings at Foley Square. Dozens of arrests reported Tuesday. Protesters still out late at night.
And that followed earlier incidents.
Right. Monday saw arrests too, including 24 people during a sit-in at Trump Tower. And the reports mentioned an NYPD officer using pepper spray.
Okay, one more city, Chicago. What did the reports say happened there?
Thousands gathered Tuesday in the Loop, Chicago's downtown area. Started at Federal Plaza, then marched.
Signs mentioned.
Yes, in English and Spanish. Things like the people say ice out of Chicago, and about keeping families together.
Was there a specific incident mentioned in the Chicago coverage?
Yes, a concerning one. A car reportedly sped through the crowd early in the march. Luckily, no one was hit, according to the reports.
That's scary. Were there arrests in Chicago?
Several arrests were made, yes. And the reports also noted that bus service downtown was suspended because of the protest.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot of cities, a lot of details pulled from these reports. If we step back and look at just what the sources describe, what patterns kind of emerge?
Well, one clear thing is the location of many protests. You see them happening near federal buildings, IC offices, places linked to immigration enforcement or government power.
Right, it seems very targeted.
Definitely. Another pattern is the range of intensity. Some reports stress peaceful demonstrations, others detail clashes, objects thrown, property damage.
And the police response varying too, from monitoring to using pepper spray, smoke, or tear gas based on the reports.
Exactly. It's not uniform across the board. The dynamics really seem to differ city by city, incident by incident, according to the coverage.
And we also see variations in the outcomes reported, different numbers of arrests, different levels of reported injuries, sometimes affecting protesters, sometimes police.
Mm-hmm. And threading through many of these reports are those statements from officials, governors, mayors, police chiefs, trying to manage the situation.
Usually acknowledging the right to protest.
But drawing a line at violence or law-breaking, often mentioning arrests as the consequence.
So bringing this back to you, the listener, when you look at all these specific details together, the different cities, the varied actions, the official quotes, all pulled from the source reports, you really get a much clearer, more textured understanding of what's happening.
Yeah, it's not just one single story of protest. It's a whole collection of related but distinct events and reactions unfolding across the country in responding to those initial raids. Looking at the details helps build that picture.
Absolutely. So we've covered how these protests, detailed in the source material, spread rapidly from LA across major U.S. cities.
Pulled directly from the reports you shared, outlining the key events and reactions described.
And as we wrap up, knowing that the report suggests more demonstrations are planned, here's something to think about, based purely on the tensions we've seen described in these sources.
How might this dynamic amending, the push from demonstrators wanting change versus the authorities trying to maintain order, how might that continue to play out and maybe evolve in the coming days, given the diverse ways it's already manifested across these cities?